by the MBA again. I absolutely loved my time there at the organisation. So just a little bit of background for those of you that don't know me. John approached me and he thought maybe it might be interesting as a slightly different talk in the series to maybe look at an alternative route in science, specifically kind of aimed at young marine biologists or early career scientists, just to kind of explore some of the non-traditional options that are out there in marine science. So just to introduce myself, as John already has, my name is Aisling. Currently I'm working as the laboratory manager for the Sir David Attenborough. Any day now, it'll be out. In the meantime, I am currently working on the James Clark Ross, which is one of their other survey vessels. But I just want to give a little bit of a background about how I ended up in that role. So I initially started with a degree in marine science from NUI Galway, and I was lucky enough to be awarded one of their bursary programs with the Marine Institute, which was initially a 2-month placement, but ended up turning into 12 months, during which time I signed up for anything that I was allowed to, which included several survey trips at sea on board the Celtic Explorer and the Celtic Voyager, which are the 2 national vessels under the Marine Institute in Ireland. And that's kind of where I got hooked. So some of the surveys that we did were ground fish surveys, so looking at demersal fish. You can see here a cod end quite full, about to be emptied into a hopper that will then feed to a processing room on board, and various biometrics will be taken there. And when I kind of first started, I'm in both pictures.
Hello,
you can see the back of my head in one. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We've just got a few people again who say that they can't hear anything. Can others let us know, please, if you are hearing Aisling through your computers? So we have got some. Sorry to interrupt you while you're mid-flow there. Yeah, so some can hear. So I think, unfortunately, it may be just a few computers that are having problems accessing their microphones on their computers.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, Aisling, I'll leave you to carry on. Thanks so much.
Oh, I'm sorry for the people that can't hear. Hopefully you'll be able to listen to it later. So you can see on board, this is the wet lab on the Celtic Explorer. She's a 65-metre vessel, one of 2 research vessels that the Marine Institute operates. And you can see here in the top photograph, we're collecting otholates. And very much, I very much enjoyed the work from the first day. Anyone who's worked at sea knows that it's quite intense, it's quite long days, and you either like it or you really don't. And I know I certainly did. Some of the fantastic opportunities you get while working at sea is in your downtime to observe, stunning wildlife and the beautiful seascapes that you get in and around your survey. I did 3 research cruises with the Marine Institute during that 12-month period, and it was nearly a running joke that everyone had managed to see whales at some point or the other, and I never had, because I couldn't leave my workstation because my work wasn't finished. And I finally got my opportunity to see my first whale, which was unfortunately a carcass passing by the ship. So that was kind of my introduction to big animals at sea. But certainly the scenery and the light and the atmosphere of the people working with you on board had me hooked, and I really enjoyed my time working with them, and really developed a love of research vessels and the science that could be completed from those platforms. After this, I did a 5-year postgraduate research position at NUI Galway, looking at submarine groundwater discharge along the coast, which also included small boat work, and also annual research cruises within the bay for background measurements. After this point, I saw an opportunity to join the MBA, and I was fascinated by its long-term science. programs, obviously the prestige of the organization itself and some of the amazing science that it has completed in the past. And I joined their team and very happily joined the MBA Sepia. You can see there some gorgeous pictures of her. She's a very beautiful, just over 15-meter vessel, 15.4. Twin screw, fantastic survey vessel. With a shallow draft, she's very suited to both the river work that is occasionally contracted, but also then offshore work as well. So she's coded to up to 60 miles offshore, although it's not currently within the remit of the science program to go that far offshore. During my time with the Sepia, I was the research vessel manager. I got to coordinate the vessel's itinerary and try to juggle the different needs and demands between the long-term science of the organisation, individual contracts coming in from external collaborators, and also to facilitate and support the research fellows at the MBA to further their research where possible. We also supplied the specimens for the Marine Biological Association's aquarium and the research animals involved in that. And of course, like any vessel, one of the other responsibilities of the manager was to oversee and to support the smooth running of the vessel, and that could mean long days, it could mean short days, and certainly one of the things that I truly enjoyed about that job and my time at the MBA was not only the people who were working there, but the variety of work and of course the time at sea, which I loved. So the time series that the MBA primarily is supported by the Sepia is their time series at L4, and so young fish YFT trawl, so that looks at larval fish and also demersal fish. You can see within the grid, so there's a set grid in and around Plymouth, and the increasing size of the circles denotes the intensity or the number of trawls over the time series, which for the demersal fish started in 1911, and that was certainly something that I found very interesting, looking through the record cards and the old deca charts, trying to figure out exactly where they had been and what they had found. So some of the common species that you find in the area will hopefully be familiar to many of you, but there are, occasional, and hopefully this video will play, occasional seasonal visitors. So here you are on the surface and it's gone. So there was always something unexpected and always something very welcome about any day at sea. Not to mention as well our opportunity to engage with undergraduate and postgraduate students for their training for various different courses. And not to mention, of course, just the incredible sea views and just the time outside in the environment. So I applied for a position with the British Antarctic Survey, and just to, I know that many of you will be familiar, so I'll just go over it for those on the off chance that they're not. So the British Antarctic Survey supports a number of research stations within the British Antarctic territories, and there is a history to that. Originally, the British Antarctic Survey came from what was known as Operation Tabarin during the Second World War, which essentially was a presence within the British Antarctic territories to prevent anchorage of any enemy vessels. After this, it then transferred to the Falkland Island Dependency Survey, which then in turn became the British Antarctic Survey. And they operate almost exclusively, the bases are within the British Antarctic territories area. So you can see there are a number of research stations: Bird Island, King Edward Point, Digny, Rothera, which is on the western side of the peninsula, Halley Research Station, and they are all supported by Bass vessels. So many of the research cruises that take part down in the Antarctic south of 60 will be supported by the Bass's research vessel. So that used to be the Ernest Shackleton, the Shackleton, which was the logistics vessel, which was retired last year, and then the James Clark Ross. And the vessel also operates in the Arctic, which I'm not sure that many people will associate the British Antarctic Survey with Arctic research. But the vessel does go up there and takes part in scientific surveys, often concentrated around the Fram Strait. You can also see on the map there that there is a NERC facility managed by the British Antarctic Survey, Ny-Ålesund, on Svalbard. And researchers can apply to go up there for their various research needs as they need to. So just to give a little bit of background, and I'm not going to focus too much on the specifics of the science, more of the background of the vessel. So the James Clark Ross has been in operation since '91, and she's going strong. She is just over 99 meters long, and I think certainly I love this picture. This is a picture of the vessel in Ryder Bay. So the Antarctic environment is huge. So the vessel, I think, looks like a small piece of Lego. So she operates, she's an ice strengthened vessel and can operate in sea ice, and kind of goes around most of the Antarctic. So there are a number of kind of common areas. So you can see top left, this is the officer's bar. So there's a small bar where you can get tea and coffee, snacks and refreshments, and plenty of seating areas. So one of the kind of main things is that, on these vessels and during these surveys, life goes on, so, everyone has their evening times or they have their downtime, and there are often pub quizzes or themed nights or, just reasons for people to come together and to take a little bit of time out of their busy survey. You have there to the top right the navigation bridge. This is where the officers, captain and mate, control the vessel, and scientists will often be found up there liaising about different paths, different stations and different requirements as they change. You can see bottom left the engine control room. I think it's a fantastic shade of green, and very often the engineering team on board will offer a tour for the scientists if they wish to see the kind of behind the scenes working of the vessel. And you can see there bottom right, you've got the saloon, and it's quite interesting. It is table service, and when the weather is quite rough, certainly the stewards do a fantastic job of not getting soup everywhere. So that's generally where the science party and the officers will have their meals. So I just go on to the next one. And so, as I said, life goes on. So lots of celebrations take place. So this is, one kind of celebration of International Women's Day. All of the women on the JOR 18005 Andrex 2 cruise, celebrating their stamp in science. And again, so the vessel and the organisation is filled with tradition. So here you can see, this was New Year's Eve this year, and you can see in the foreground the bell, the James Clark Ross bell. And tradition has it that the youngest member of the crew on board will ring, the oldest member will ring out the old year, and the youngest member will ring in the new year. So there's fantastic and wonderful and sometimes quite strange traditions, such as crossing the line, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of and certainly partaken in. So yeah, there are fantastic traditions. One of the cruises that I was on certainly took my breath away. So this is Elephant Island, as I'm sure many of the enthusiasts would know, that this is where Shackleton and his team took refuge after their vessel went down, Endurance went down, and it's from there that they took the James Caird, and they sailed to South Georgia to traverse that and to seek help for the remaining crew. And to see that in person, and to see it on a clear day. I've been past there twice. One day was like this, and one day I couldn't see anything. It really was an absolute privilege. One of the more unexpected things for me personally, working in the Antarctic and in the Arctic, was my love of ice. Ice comes in all shapes and sizes. There are many categories and classifications of ice, what it does, how it looks like, how it freezes, how it moves. And certainly the officers are well versed on all of that. But certainly the way that the light catches the ice, the way that the water moves around it, really, really took me. It's absolutely fascinating. I could spend all day just watching the ice. And sometimes, the views of ice are for your scientific objective. This is in Sheldon Cove, on the Western Peninsula, and part of the survey was to track the retreat of the ice shelves within the fjords, and they had it mapped during the cruise. The cruise was Icebergs 3 in this particular cruise, and they were trying to look at how the ice front was being undercut, and how it was positioning on the water as it came down the fjord. Certainly there has been stark recession of the ice over the last 20 odd years, and certainly in one of the bays where we witnessed an ice calving event where over a 24-hour period nearly 1 kilometre of the ice front calved off. And certainly there will be links to the research if you do want to find out more about these projects. But certainly the equipment on board helps the researchers to achieve that. So kind of the general life on board is all very lovely. You tend to work quite long days, usually 12 hours, usually not less than 12 hours. And there's a number of equipment, pieces of scientific equipment that can be launched from the vessel in order to examine whatever aspect the researchers are looking at. So what you have here is a multi-core. It's called an Octopus Core, and this from the card has been deployed in Dusa Bay, which is close to James Ross Island, and you can see some very nice cores there on the right hand side, and the cores can be collected for many different reasons. And I think for that cruise there was interest in organic carbon, but also in forams within the cores. This was part of the Larsen C attempt to get down to the Larsen ice shelf, which unfortunately was unsuccessful due to ice cover. But the secondary backup location was highly successful. So you can see there, the larger picture is part of the laboratory spaces within the JCR. Scientists will come on board, as I'm sure many of you know, will come on board with their equipment. There's a number of fixed equipment on board, and certain instruments that are available to use, but mostly people will bring, say, their own filter rigs or their own analyzers with them. And here you can see a very, very beautiful bucket of Calanus that was from the Arctic in 2018, and hopefully the video will play. So one of the other methods that is often used on board is an agassiz trawl and dredges and mid-water nets, such as a mock net, which is a multiple opening and closing discrete sampling plankton net. And these beautiful images were collected during the Larsen C Benthos cruise, and you can see a beautiful holothurian there in the centre, and some lovely amphipods and some copepods and some really beautiful stuff chitin there at the bottom. So a lot of, depending on the objectives of the cruise, they will have their methodology design and they will collect their specimens as required for analysis generally back at home. So for the most part, the work on board is mostly collection based as opposed to processing. And you can see here what happens when the net comes in. The stuff that's in the net gets sorted out into its various different groups. You can see there on the top right is a pygnogonid. sea spider, and often within the Antarctic or in the colder waters, you can get animals that are quite a lot larger. So you can get things that are a lot larger than what you would recognize from home. And of course, there's always time to combine science with a little bit of fun. You have here a weather balloon, which has been happily decorated by somebody on board, and of course, polystyrene cups. They often go down on the CTD. So the CTD is the conductivity, temperature, and depth recorder, which is often attached to a rosette, so a metal cage, where you can sample bottles at depth, and it's controlled in the winch room. So you can choose a bottle to get a discrete water sample at, say, 200 meters, 5,000 meters, whatever your target depth is. Often people put polystyrene cups on the CTD rosette, and the pressure crushes them, and you come back up with tiny works of art, which is a firm favourite. But we do on occasion get some downtime. So if you're doing multiple cruises, you might get a day here or there between cruises. Here you can see this is Stanley in the Falkland Islands. The vessel is often moored about a 10-minute walk away from here, so you can go and take a walk and kind of clear your head and stretch your legs, which you certainly want to do after a couple of weeks at sea. But unfortunately, the Falklands is often used as a jump-off point, as is Punta Arenas in Chile. And you do have to, in order to access the Antarctic, you do have to cross the Drake Passage, which, depending on your constitution, can not be fantastic. This is the Drake Passage, us in the Drake Passage, November 2018, and those two containers are containerized labs, and there are people working in them, although there wasn't exactly at that point because they were asked to come inside. But there can be quite rough conditions to try to overcome. My old supervisor used to say to me, everything is easy until it's on a moving platform, and I think that certainly holds up there. Simply, having a shower can be quite tricky. And I have been on vessels before where they put a no shower order when the weather was too poor, in case somebody kind of fell and hurt themselves and they weren't found. And I guess one of the other kind of very unexpected bonuses of the job is I'm not a wildlife photographer by any means, so I'm not trying to recreate any beautiful photographs, but is the close encounters with animals. Here you have a lovely humpback whale, and you can often hear the rapid machine gun fire of people's SLRs as they try to get the best photos as they can. When you do hit these areas, these biogenic hotspots, it can seem that the place is quite literally lousy with wildlife. We went through the South Orkney Passage last year, and on our way through the passage is an area of upwelling. And our way through the passage, managed to see humpback whales, penguin, albatross, cormorants, and just a huge variety of wildlife, which is really fantastic. But of course, you don't want your wildlife interacting with your science. So yeah, this is an Argo float to be deployed, and they can come back with all kinds of growth and occasional damage, and you're not quite sure where the damage came from. So this is a very kind reminder from one of the scientists to please leave his float alone. So again, depending on your location, you can get a high number of animals in the area. This elephant seal has been tagged and looks like it has been graffitied. But the researchers on this beach, so this is Sea Lion Island in the Falklands, the researchers name them with hair dye in order to identify them and to track their movements throughout the season, the breeding season and the pupping season. And it is really a fantastic location to go. So this area, I think it was used, I think they got footage in one of the Blue Planet episodes where you get the orca come right into the beach, and they hunt the baby seals, the baby elephant seals up the beach, and occasionally do get them. They also lurk in the deeper water for as soon as they leave the kind of nursery rockery, and head off. So yeah, it's a very nice one. And again, with wildlife, you can end up with wildlife in unexpected locations. We were extremely lucky to have a bear join us on the ice. This is part of the Arctic project in 2018. And we were on station and cleared a pool within the ice, and we were on station for 24 hours. So during that time, a bear caught the scent of the ship and came in for a look, and spent about maybe 2 or 3 hours hanging off the back of the ship, just kind of pacing around and looking to see essentially if we had any food, which of course we didn't. But it was, really special. And then of course on the Falklands, I love it. It's fantastic. So you have your little penguin colonies. These are gentoo penguins, and they'll potter through the fields with the sheep up to higher ground, and they'll have their own little highways and byways through the fields, and the sheep just kind of look at them as they pass by. So there really is some spectacular wildlife to be had. Now, I don't know, am I still with you?
Yes, all good, all good.
It's all good. Okay, I've skipped past that last video. So there is another video of the bear, and hopefully John will be able to upload it with the recording. So finally, and I guess like most interestingly, the new vessel. So the Sir David Attenborough is going to be 128 metre long, near a 24 metre beam, with a kind of state of the art fixtures and facilities for researchers for multidisciplinary aims. So you have a helipad, which may or may not be used for helicopter operations, but can certainly be used for flying of drones, additional storage space. The laboratory facilities within the ship are going to be absolutely fantastic. We've been up to the yard. Unfortunately, I can't share the detailed photos, but the laboratory spaces they far outdo anybody who's been on the James Clark Ross. They are purpose built through a consultation of national and international science panels as to what was needed from the community, and the best of what they had suggested is going to be in place. So it's a very exciting vessel. It's going to be acoustically silent. It's going to be very, very quiet, and it's going to be there's also going to be a moon pool for the deployment. So a covered moon pool within the scientific hangar, which is just aft, and you'll be able to deploy various bits of equipment through there, including, of course, Boaty McBoatface, the submersible that they named in honour of the fantastic name selected by the public. There will be approximately 30 crew and up to a maximum of 60 science / support staff. So it'll be a busy vessel, and so here you can see the bow during construction. This while it was still within the hangar and it didn't have the superstructure on top. And going to the yard to visit the vessel under construction really is an experience. I was absolutely blistering hot, and there was so much noise, and it was so kind of cramped and very disorientating when there's no visual references of where you are. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one who ended up kind of scratching my head, wondering what floor I was on, what deck, which space I was in. Yeah, it definitely takes a bit of time to get your head around it. So the last or second to last slide. So this is the most recent picture I can share with you. So this is one of 2 cargo tenders that are going to accompany the vessel. So this is Terror. Erebus has completed acceptance tests. So this is a cargo tender. So the vessel, along with the James Clark Ross, also fulfills the logistics role and supports the various bases to either ferry people, equipment, samples, and even like drums of oil, etc., to the various base locations. And so these cargo tenders are really like the lifeblood between the ship and the stations. And due to the construction of the SDA, and of as well the timings of it, a certain number of modernisation projects have been undertaken for British Antarctic Survey bases, including modernisation of the wharf at the Rotherham Research Station and KEP, King Edward Point Research Station, to enable the larger vessel. So the SDA is 30 metres longer than the James Clark Ross, to enable her to safely come alongside at those locations. There are other locations where the cargo tender will always be used. And so yeah, it's fantastic to see Terror up in action, and look forward to seeing her. So this is one of the photos of the internal structure that I can share. This is the laboratory manager's cabin. We're based on the science deck of the vessel, and we will be there to support any of the science that is due to happen on board. The SDA will have some key new pieces of equipment that will be able to really push the ability of what measurements can be made, especially with its new advanced acoustic system that they're looking forward to trialing in the next year. So there will be large opportunities for people to expand their science through this platform. And I'd just like to say thank you. That's my dad, by the way. So he came to the naming ceremony of the SDA, and we kitted him out in all of the Antarctic gear. But thank you. And kind of informally, I would like to say to anyone from the science community who are listening, we, as the laboratory managers, have the full spec of exactly what's available on board, the configurations, and the fixed equipment. And we would love to engage and to speak and support people to formulate grants in order to complete their research on board the new vessel. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisling. That was a brilliant talk. Thank you very much. We've got a few questions that have come in. You'll be glad to hear, and thank you for putting up with the technology. A few alarming moments, but it all worked out fine. So thank you for that. So yes, we've got some questions, if that's okay. Mark was asking about how many people approximately would be on board a vessel at a given time.
That's a great question. It depends on the remit of the passage. So for the James Clark Ross at the moment, their core crew is about 30, and they can take additional passengers up to kind of 60, 65-ish. For the SDA, they will have a crew of also about 30, and they will hope to have 60 between science and support personnel on board. So it can be a full complement of 90 on the SDA. That's quite a step up. It'll be a lot busier, and how they decide to run the cruises and support various projects from that platform, I don't quite know yet, but I'm sure we'll find out in time. And of course, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so a lot. There's a question about a topical question about COVID-19, and what does the season look like this year?
BAS senior management team have been meeting regularly to discuss and to make a plan for what is going to happen to the vessels, to the station for the upcoming season. As you know, there's overwintering teams. They did go ahead. So there is an overwintering teams at the moment in Sydney, KEP, Rotherham, Bird Island. For the upcoming season, they have, as I'm sure many organisations, they have 3 scenarios which, any of which could kind of go ahead. But as far as I know, they're still planning to provide support to the bases, to complete core essential science, and to keep the bases open and running. And they have measures to achieve that.
So there are people out there, presumably now, who have not come back because of the current situation. Is that right?
Yeah, so at the end of this season, um, so I was on board when it first became known. So I was on board the vessel, and they did say that they would, potentially have to quarantine the vessel if anybody appeared to be sick. Fortunately, that didn't happen, so we were able to leave the vessel and to return home. But the crew that were on board at the time, they were asked to extend their time on board in order to support the shutting down, the wintering of the stations. So what they expected to be a 2 month trip, I think turned into a 4 month trip. And usually, so there's a couple of jump off points for people entering and leaving the Antarctic. One would be the Falkland Islands, and of course they shut down all of their borders. The other is Punta Arenas, and they also shut down their borders. So they had no choice but to commission a vessel and to bring all of the people that they would usually fly home and to sail them home instead.
Right. Mm. Possibly related to that, have they? There's presumably no food shortage, and how do you get fresh veg on board?
Yeah, usually I'll go non-COVID first. So
Yeah.
in normal times, they have agents who will support and get the supplies needed. Your fresh produce will last for a couple of weeks, and then you start to see Chargill's lettuce, and you know it's on the way out. The bananas are the first to go. When you are on long endurance trips, that picture that I showed of the International Women's Day, so that was a long endurance trip, and that was a couple of months. So yeah, you lose all fresh vegetables after a while, and you start to fantasize about salad.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. It's more a scientific question from Matt. How long have you noted long-term change in the polar regions?
I haven't been with the organisation long enough. I can't say firsthand. I can only say what colleagues have. I can only repeat what colleagues have said. The stark the stark retreat of the ice fronts in the bays that we were studying back in December and January under the icebergs cruise. Um, uh, Certainly, there is in the last 5 to 8 years, there's been a speed up of the disappearance of those ice shelves, of those glaciers. But oddly enough, the long-term data for in and around the Rothera doesn't show the same thing. So it's, I think, quite a complex thing, and certainly the orchestra project is looking at parts of that. I've put a link to it at the end of the talk, and I can certainly put that up again if people want to have a look. But certainly that project is better equipped to answer that question.
Yeah, okay, that's great. The obvious question is, when is the Sir David Attenborough going to appear? Is there a date?
Yeah, they're hoping. So obviously, there's been delays due to COVID, and they're hoping to take the vessel in the next couple of months for her to start engine trials and various equipment acceptance tests. So in the next, while, they will certainly hope to do the ice trials, and after that, then with the view to doing a science rehearsal cruise to test all of the scientific equipment on board and to give the community a chance to kind of have a bit of a play without the expectation of producing any serious science with it.
Yeah. Okay. We better wrap up shortly. Peter, the science, he's called himself, has asked, where do you sling your hook? Because he's worried that the cabin looks pretty Spartan.
The cabin will be lovely when it's ready. I think probably lesser known community around Bass is the Bass employee who vans it. So between cruises, myself and a couple of my seagoing colleagues, we live in camper vans while we're at the Cambridge site, and then when we go to rejoin the cruise, we go back to our trusty cabin on the James Clark Ross.
Excellent. And finally, there's a question about how do you get into this kind of work? How would you recommend people who would like to get into this kind of work experience? What should they do?
Apply for, I guess, field science bursaries. Try to, I guess, see if there's any summer placements or the like. If you have an interest in equipment, run with it. There's lots of equipment that comes onto ships. Some principles are similar and some are not. So the more you know about, or the more background you have with various bits of scientific kit, so some things are quite universal. So like a CTD will generally go overboard. There'll probably be some kind of plankton net. You're most likely going to be measuring salinity, most likely going to be measuring chlorophyll. So the likes of those, if you take an interest in kind of core pieces, and try to reach out to whoever your national vessels organisers are and see if they've any space.
Excellent. All right. I think we'll leave the questions there, but we're sure we'll follow up any others that people want to give us. Thank you ever so much, Ashley, again.
And thank you so much, Sean. And as I said, I'd like to leave my my email address available if people would like to contact me about any kind of further detailed questions, especially the science users. We would love to hear from you and to hopefully support you.
Brilliant. Okay, and Alex, could you put up the closing slides? Ash does that. Okay, so yes, thank you ever so much, Ashley. That's a brilliant talk. We'll put that up on YouTube with your email address and also those video clips as well. So we'll put those up if that's okay. The next session is in 2 weeks' time, which is Dr. Francis Bunker, and he'll be talking about seaweed in rock pools. And Francis runs a course also at the MBA, which we're still hoping to run in August. So there'll be some details on that. So please join that. If you could put the last slide, Alex. And while the last slide's coming in, a lot of people have said thanks for an excellent talk, Aisling. Very interesting, and thank you ever so much. So we'll forward on those details. So it's just to say thank you to Aisling, and thank you for listening. Please remember the MBA is a membership organisation, and we'll be delighted if people would come forward and join the MBA to increase the community and also come forward for any future talks. So we'll leave it there, and thank you ever so much for everybody for joining. Thank you.